Hello, everybody. This week's Parsha is Parshat Yitro, named after perhaps the most famous non-Jew, maybe until today, because now we have a Jew and a non-Jew both sitting at the seat of power in Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff. And so today, with my dear friend Rabbi Alan Litwak, we're going to talk about where do Jews make connections, find connections, build relationships with people of other faiths, and how have those people and those relationships enriched Judaism? Stay around for Face to Face. Hello there, my name is David Paskin. Welcome back to Face, and I'm here again with Rabbi Alan Litwak. How you doing, Rabbi Litwak?
How are you? Great.
Good.
Fabulous.
Good to see you. So we have this parsha, this famous parsha today, maybe the most famous because it contains, of course, the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 Commandments. I mean, there are so many momentous things that happen in this week's parsha, this week's portion, and yet it's named after Yitro, a non-Jewish person. It was making me think of the story of Matovu, and how Matovu, the very first prayer that we say as a community when we gather together traditionally, was written by another non-Jew, by Bilam. And of course we have Doug Emhoff, we have Kamala Harris, an interfaith relationship. So today we wanted to talk with you, Rabbi Litwak, and with everyone about interfaith relations, and not about who should convert, who shouldn't convert. That we're not talking about that. We want to focus on the beauty and the potential and the possibility in building these relationships, nurturing them, what we can learn from other people, from other faiths, from other communities, and how that historically has enriched Judaism and the Jewish people. And so the first person, let's start with Yitro. I mean, in this week's Torah portion, Moses thinks he knows what he's doing, seems to be at a bit of a loss because he's overwhelmed, and Yitro kind of swoops in and says, let me tell you how it's done. Let me tell you how to get this done. And this piece of advice becomes the basis upon which all of Jewish law and the justice, even our justice system today in America, is built. What do you make of the power of this non-Jewish influencer in Jewish history?
I think that this is only the beginning, that we have a long and proud history of being influenced by others from others of different faiths. And we can go all the way and pick a spot. And no matter where the Jews have found themselves in history and in space, we have adopted in space.
You mean like with the lasers?
No.
Okay,
as
sorry.
in place.
Sorry, just need to clarify.
Sure. That we have been influenced. We have adopted traditions and ideas from the surrounding cultures. Let's talk about Yitro, because for the ancient rabbis, the relationship, and it was a special relationship between Yitro and his son-in-law Moses, prompts a great deal of speculation. Right? He is
and consternation, I think.
Right. All right. He is a member. Yitro is a member of the Mishpacha. Right. He by virtue of marriage. Right. But he's also seen positively because of what he does. One, obviously, like you spoke about, easing Moses's burden, but also Yitro blesses God on hearing about the rescue of the Jews at at the Sea of Reeds from the hands of Pharaoh. And so the rabbis, right, take this individual, right, and what do? Right? They actually, in the Midrash, hold that Yitro converts to Judaism. Right? Now, why do they need to do that? Right? Why? Because they couldn't countenance the idea that a non-Jew, all right, would have influence over Moses and the Jewish people.
It was terrifying to them.
Right. And we're at a different point in history, right? We can acknowledge, right, because we know enough about history, right, to recognize that, again, no matter where we have gone, no matter where we have been in time and place, that we have adopted things from the surrounding cultures, and that we have been strengthened by that, right? So I'm going to argue that we benefit from interfaith relations, right? That we can learn.
What do you make, though, of let's not just dismiss the rabbi's concerns. What do you make of not only the advantages and the profound positive impact, but what do you make of the dangers of being too influenced, right? So you and I were talking earlier about during the Hanukkah story, the Hellenizers, and this rift that grew between those who wanted to find ways to live Jewishly in the midst of a non-Jewish world, and those who said, no, we can't be influenced by people who are not like us. What do you make of that tension?
Well, it is the continual tension, and as we engage, we within the Jewish community engage with the outside community more and more, that there is always the possibility that if I turn my head and look over there, then all of a sudden, I'm gone. And I get that, but I think, and I appreciate that, but I just don't think that in today's day and age, right, that we can approach interfaith relations in the way that most of the Jewish community approached it 200 years ago, which was, as we became more able to engage in the wider society, as the world went through emancipation, right, and Jews were able to interact with non-Jews in ways much greater than they normally were, that there was a possibility, right? And so what is it that the majority of the Jews did? They slammed the door shut, okay, and said, no way, no how, you're not allowed to do anything. And if we look at your grandparents or my grandparents, and we say, what was the defining factor or the defining feature of whether you were in the Jewish community or not in the Jewish community, right? It was if you were married to somebody who was Jewish, right? Or that make sure that you have at least your mother who was Jewish, right? And now Jews are such a part of the wider society that it is impossible for us to think of trying to shut the doors, right? Too many opportunities to explore. So how do we approach this in a Jewish way? Right?
And I would take it even a step farther, I wonder, and because I think about the rabbis being so concerned about Yitro and needing to see him as a convert, and yet naming the parsha after him, I can't help but wonder, is there a hint in that not only it's not enough to acknowledge that this is the reality, but we need to embrace this reality. We need to see this as an opportunity for Judaism to flourish, and not only for us to spread Judaism, because I see that, I won't lie that when I see Vice President Kamala Harris, celebrating Hanukkah with her husband, I love the fact that we have been able to influence her in that way. I loved seeing Senator Joe Lieberman, and hearing the stories about him walking to the Capitol on Shabbat. I mean, so, right. But there's a flip side to that also, which is also, I think, positive, that Judaism has changed as a result of our relationships with other faiths.
Correct.
For the better.
Yeah. Yeah, there are plenty of examples of how Judaism has adopted things out of the wider society. Right? The fact is that you could go to any synagogue, right? And 9 out of 10 synagogues, you walk into the sanctuary, and there are all of these pews that are there. But it's hard to believe, but a little bit more than 200 years ago, right? The pews weren't a part of Jewish worship or synagogue experience.
I'm not sure I would put that in the influenced us for good category, but
all right,
definitely influenced us. It's interesting because there's actually kind of a movement in some communities away from, back to our roots. So there's temporal influence, and then there's really lasting, meaningful influence also. I think we've had both.
Look, we can look at theological. There is some historians would argue that Judaism and Jewish monotheism was influenced by Zoroastrianism, a faith that the Jewish people encountered during the biblical exile, and in their broader interactions with the other Near Eastern peoples, and then was certainly a part of Zoroastrianism. Was common in Persia, where Cyrus the Great, and when Cyrus the Great allowed the Jews to return after Babylonian exile, I'm sure that they were positively influenced by this great leader and the culture that he represented, right? And that we adopted the ideas. Zoroastrianism is not entirely monotheistic, but it did teach that there was a singular supreme being, right? And that idea, all right, even at that time in Judaism, was still up. It was still in flux, right? And certainly, I think you mentioned Hellenism, right? Greek culture and ideas influenced Judaism during the Second Temple period, where I think that there are ways for us to think about interfaith relations and interfaith dialogue. And I would put them into 3 buckets, right? There's the exclusivist bucket, right? There's the pluralist, and there's the inclusivist. The exclusivist, all right, says that I own the truth, okay? That my community, my tradition, my encounter with God is the exclusive truth. All other claims of when it comes to encountering God, are a priori false. Okay? The pluralist takes the opposite tack and accepts that no one tradition can claim the singular truth. The third, which is the in-between, the inclusivist, right, acknowledges that there are many communities with their own traditions and own beliefs and truths, but maintains the importance of his or her own way of seeing things, right? And understands other traditions through that lens, right? For the inclusivist, other religions are explained, right? I acknowledge through my own, okay? I acknowledge the world outside of me, right? But I rely on my worldview to make it comprehensible, to give it meaning. I speak the language of my theology and use my theology and its vocabulary to understand others, right? In this, I differ from the pluralist, who will address others using their language, right? The pluralist can be both criticized for trying to step out of or stepping out of his own tradition, right? His own religious language, right? But can be admired for acknowledging and naming people and naming others in their own traditions, right?
What you sorry to interrupt. What you describe as a pluralist is makes me think of a young lady in our community actually who just shared some writing with us, and that's what I think of. Right, how she comes from a family with a Jewish father, a non-Jewish mother, and she talked in that she's a young lady, an amazing young lady, and she talked about how she sees herself as really as wanting to celebrate all of that as a part of her own spiritual self, and that she doesn't need to be exclusive, and
right.
Even a step farther, she doesn't need to choose one and then have that influence or be influenced. She wants to be fully pluralistic. At least that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, I think, look, the pluralist accepts that truth is not in the possession of one particular tradition. Understanding religion as a way of approaching rather than defining or naming God. I accept my limitations in understanding the wider world and believe that God is active within the world, but I may not necessarily, or I'm not going to define for everybody else, this is what it is, right? The exclusivist says, the other religions are simply false, that there is no broader outside world where we need to harmonize or address other claims, right? That there's only one realm, right? And you either have it or you don't have it. You either accept it or you don't accept it, right? Go ahead.
I don't want to rehash the December dilemma, but I'm curious what you think about this. So I'll use Halloween as an example. So when my kids were growing up, I was woefully unsuccessful at this. But here was my thinking. My thinking was Halloween is not our holiday; it is other people's holiday, and gay goes into hay. Like they should be able to celebrate. And so what I tried to do with my kids was. You're not going to go out and trick or treat, but you're going to help other people celebrate. So if someone comes to the door, you can get dressed up, right? And you can help them celebrate by giving them candy. And then every time you do that mitzvah of helping them celebrate, you can have a piece of candy also. Where does that kind of thinking, that's because I don't think that's pluralistic. I mean, to a certain extent, that's still, by the way, that worked until my kids. Right. Yeah. That worked until my kids figured me out and said, "Yeah, we're going out."
Nice job, Rabbi David.
Yeah,
thanks.
I know it really didn't happen, right. But I mean, it's inclusivist in the sense that, right? I'm celebrating other people's celebrations, but I'm not necessarily making that my own.
And you're defining others through the lens of your own tradition, right?
Right. Right.
That, Halloween, I'm not sure, is the best example because it's so secular
Right.
that the notion of All Hallows Eve and any of that really doesn't play in anybody's book anymore versus, I'll say, Christianity or Christmas.
Although it's
Yes, there are
interesting,
people.
there's pushback, understandable pushback, I think, from some of the Christian community saying, where has the Christ gone from Christmas, right?
Correct. Yeah. All right. And that's where I wouldn't want to have a Hanukkah bush because then then I'm not respecting others' traditions. I want to be an inclusivist because I want to acknowledge that they have a truth, but I understand that from my own belief, right, which is that tree represents, right, certain things within Christianity. And my putting up a tree doesn't make it make those beliefs or those ideas go away.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes a tricky line to walk because I think about,
Sure.
I agree with you about the Hanukkah bush, but then I also think about presents. Presents were, at least my understanding is that presents were not originally a big part of Hanukkah, but we inherited that from Christmas, as it were. And I'll be the first to say, look, we take it overboard, but that's a beautiful, that's kind of a beautiful tradition. Valentine's Day, in some ways, is the same way.
Right.
Why would Jews want to say no to something that is genuinely beautiful and positive, even though it's not part of our tradition? And I guess that's where that's a pluralist mindset.
Right. And I think that we have lots of history of doing that throughout. I mean, Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah, we can talk about the history of Hanukkah, right? But the notion of having a holiday of light in the winter did not originate with Judaism, not even close.
Right.
So,
Right. I think in my old age, one of the things that I've only recently come to realize is that, well, you said it earlier, actually, is that I don't have all the answers. And that is to say, I've known that I don't have the answers for a long time, but I trust individuals to find the path that is right for them. And it's not my job to judge that. I will acknowledge that I have been, throughout my life, quite judgmental of which of those three paths people choose to take when it comes to interfaith relations. And I think I've now come to the point where I celebrate individuals as yitros, right? As people who forge their own path, whatever path that is, and there can be beauty found in all of them.
I would agree with that. My closing thought, though, is that in order for us to have meaningful interfaith relations, I do have to know something about my own tradition, okay? And where we want to make sure, and I'll say we, meaning anyone within their own faith tradition, is we want to make sure that people know enough to make decisions, right? To say I don't like Brussels sprouts, which I actually love Brussels sprouts, but I don't like Brussels sprouts because I've never tried them. I don't know what they look like. Well, Rabbi David, you've never had my Brussels sprouts. Okay, all right. That if I haven't experienced it, or I don't know what they look like, I don't know what they taste like, and I just say no, right, then I have missed the opportunity, I have missed the the beauty of a good Brussels sprout. Okay, and unfortunately, all kinds of traditions. When I work with people who convert to Judaism, so often they say to me, "Well, I'm really not anything. I was raised Catholic, but what does that mean? Well, we went to church once every
Right.
year, and I don't really remember anything, or I don't know anything." And that may be good because they come to Judaism tabula rasa, as a clean slate. But I do sort of say, I wonder if you had spent time in your own religious tradition, whether you would find something there that you're seeking, and hopefully we'll find in Judaism, because we want people to do that. But
Yeah.
I guess I want to make sure when we talk about interfaith relations, that has to be based in knowledge and understanding of the richness of, in our case, of Jewish tradition.
Amen. Amen. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for joining us again this
Always.
week. Yeah.
Yeah,
And we
thank
will,
you, David.
of course, and we'll see you all next week for another episode of Face to Face.